Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Code Your English, where we explore ideas that sharpen your mind, your English, and your life. Today, I want to begin with a quiet contradiction, a paradox that almost everyone experiences but few notice. We live in a world where working longer hours has become a badge of honor. Many of us wake up early, check emails before breakfast, answer messages during lunch, and often stay late into the night, finishing tasks that feel urgent. On the surface, this is what hard work looks like. Yet, strangely, despite all this effort, we often feel as if we haven't accomplished enough. The day ends, we glance at our to-do lists, and the sense of progress is small, almost negligible. How can it be that working more hours can sometimes make us feel less productive? This is where the first big idea enters. More hours do not equal better results. In fact, the quality of your time, your attention, and your focus often matters far more than the quantity of hours you invest. Think about it like this. If you spend 10 hours performing small, distracted tasks, constantly checking your phone or switching between projects, the brain never truly settles into a state of deep concentration. Compare that to 2 hours of completely focused, undisturbed work on a single meaningful task. Those 2 hours can produce more insight, progress, and satisfaction than an entire day of scattered activity. This is not a theory. It's a reflection of how our minds work, how attention and energy are finite, and how concentration multiplies results. Now, I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. Ask yourself, what if the problem isn't laziness, poor time management, or lack of discipline? What if the real challenge lies in how we use our attention? Often, we believe that effort is measured by hours spent at the desk, but effort without focus is like trying to fill a cup with a hole at the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, the cup never fills. In the same way, shallow, distracted work rarely produces the satisfaction, mastery, or progress we expect. This is why thinking about attention differently is not just a productivity tip. It's a fundamental shift in how we approach work, learning, and personal growth. And this brings us to the idea that will guide today's discussion: the 2-hour rule. I won't explain it fully just yet, but here is the essence. In a world that glorifies endless activity, there is enormous power in just 2 hours of focused, intentional effort. 2 hours that are carefully protected from distractions. 2 hours where your mind is fully present. 2 hours where your energy and attention are devoted to what matters most. Later in this podcast, we will explore how this simple principle can transform not only your productivity, but also the way you feel about your work and your progress. By thinking in this way, you are not just learning a productivity hack. You are learning a new way to see your own potential. For C1 level listeners, this segment encourages abstract thinking, invites contrastive reasoning, and sets a reflective, analytical tone for the rest of the episode. It primes your mind to question assumptions, to examine daily habits critically, and to consider that the most effective work is often not the longest work, but the most focused and meaningful work. The modern illusion of productivity. In our modern world, the every idea of productivity has become more complicated and, in many ways, more deceptive than ever before. We often measure success by how busy we are, how many meetings we attend, how quickly we respond to emails, or how many tasks appear on our to-do lists. If the day feels full, we assume that we have been productive. But this assumption can be misleading. There is a type of activity I want to call shallow productivity, tasks that create the appearance of work but contribute very little to meaningful outcomes. Shallow productivity is everywhere. Answering emails one after another without prioritizing, checking notifications every few minutes, flipping between multiple projects without completing any, and attending meetings that feel urgent but add little real value. On the surface, these actions make us feel busy, but in reality, they often consume the energy and attention we could have devoted to deeper, more significant work. Modern work environments, and even our own habits, encourage this illusion. Visibility is often rewarded more than actual results. A person who sends frequent emails, replies instantly to messages, or posts updates on collaborative platforms appears active and committed. Meanwhile, someone who spends uninterrupted hours thinking, writing, or learning may seem quiet and invisible, even though the depth of their work is far more valuable. In other words, organizations and social norms frequently reward motion over progress. This creates a cycle in which long hours, constant availability, and reactive behavior are mistaken for productivity, even when they generate minimal real achievement. This brings us to a central problem. Long hours do not guarantee deep results. Many people feel exhausted at the end of a workday and assume they must have been productive because they have spent so much time working. But the feeling of effort does not equal meaningful progress. The reason lies in how the human brain functions. Our cognitive resources are limited, and attention is a finite energy. When we divide our focus across many small, shallow tasks, each switch consumes mental energy, slows us down, and reduces the quality of our work. This is called the cognitive switching cost. Every time you shift from one task to another, your brain must readjust, which reduces efficiency and increases fatigue. Unlike a machine, our minds are not built for constant multitasking. Instead, they excel when deeply immersed in a single meaningful task. Moreover, even after switching from one task to another, a residue of the previous task often lingers in our mind. Psychologists call this attention residue. Imagine leaving an unfinished email in your inbox while trying to write a report. Even if you attempt to focus on the report, part of your attention remains stuck on the email, unconsciously dividing your cognitive energy. This invisible residue diminishes performance and makes deep concentration almost impossible. Over time, this leads to a feeling of being busy without actually completing the work that matters most. Finally, shallow productivity encourages false progress. We confuse activity with achievement. Checking boxes on a to-do list or attending endless meetings can create a temporary sense of movement. But when we step back and evaluate the real outcomes, little has changed. In contrast, focused, uninterrupted work, even for a short period, produces tangible, meaningful results. The challenge is recognizing this distinction and resisting the cultural and technological pressures that make constant busyness feel necessary. Understanding the modern illusion of productivity is essential for anyone who wants to master the 2-hour rule and work smarter, not harder. By becoming aware of shallow productivity, cognitive switching costs, attention residue, and false progress, we can begin to reclaim our attention and energy for tasks that truly matter. Instead of mistaking motion for progress, we can design our days around focus and depth, creating meaningful results without the exhausting long hours that dominate so many lives. Why focus is more powerful than time. When we think about productivity, we often focus on the number of hours we put in. The assumption seems simple. The more time we spend working, the more we accomplish. But the reality of how the human brain works is far more nuanced. In fact, the most significant difference in performance is not measured by time alone, but by the quality of attention we bring to each moment. Deep focus is a state where the brain is fully engaged with a single task, free from interruptions, distractions, or the mental tug of multiple competing priorities. In this state, the brain can operate at its highest efficiency, making connections, solving problems, and creating outputs in a way that scattered effort rarely allows. Neuroscience has shown that deep focus enhances cognitive processing, consolidates learning, and allows our mental energy to work exponentially rather than linearly. To understand why focus is so powerful, it helps to contrast it with surface-level engagement. Imagine studying a language while your phone is buzzing constantly, or writing an essay while switching between multiple browser tabs. In these moments, your brain is only partially present. You might be completing tasks, but the depth of understanding and creativity is limited. In contrast, immersive concentration allows the mind to absorb information fully, connect ideas more effectively, and notice patterns that would otherwise go unnoticed. A single hour of truly focused work can often produce results equivalent to several hours of distracted effort. This is why, in practice, 2 hours of concentrated attention can outperform 10 hours of shallow, fragmented activity. The concept can also be framed as the difference between passive time and intentional time. Passive time is time spent being busy without strategic attention. It is the default state of many workdays, where activity is mistaken for achievement. Intentional time, on the other hand, is when you allocate your attention deliberately, protecting it from interruptions and aligning it with your goals. Intentional time magnifies effort because each action is guided by clarity of purpose, allowing the brain to fully integrate and act on information. The productivity of intentional time is not simply additive, it is multiplicative. A focused hour can yield exponentially greater output than several passive hours because the mind is operating at maximum efficiency, not in fragments. Another way to see this is through the distinction between mental presence and mental availability. Mental presence is when your thoughts, attention, and energy are fully invested in what you are doing. Mental availability is when you are physically present, but your mind is divided, perhaps worrying about emails, planning tomorrow's tasks, or simply distracted by notifications. Being mentally present allows the brain to enter a state of flow, where time seems to pass quickly, ideas emerge naturally, and performance peaks. Mental availability, while it might feel productive, is a diluted state in which progress is slow, errors are more common, and satisfaction is low. Focused attention also compresses learning and output. When the mind is undistracted, new information is encoded more efficiently, understanding deepens faster, and problem-solving accelerates. Mistakes are fewer because the brain can anticipate and correct them in real time, rather than reacting after the fact. Additionally, focused attention enhances memory retention and skill acquisition, making every moment of concentrated effort far more valuable than the same amount of time spent in distraction. In essence, quality of attention multiplies effort because it aligns cognitive energy with intention, creating results that feel effortless yet are profoundly impactful. The 2-hour rule explained clearly. Now that we understand the power of focus and the limitations of shallow productivity, it is time to introduce the principle that can transform how we approach work and learning: the 2-hour rule. At its core, the 2-hour rule is deceptively simple. Dedicating 2 hours of uninterrupted, fully focused effort to a single meaningful task will almost always produce more results than many more hours of scattered or distracted work. It is not about working longer or harder, it is about working smarter, with full attention and energy aligned to the task at hand. The beauty of this rule lies in its clarity and precision. It is a framework that respects the brain's natural rhythms, human limitations, and the way deep learning and creative output actually occur. It is important to understand what the 2-hour rule is not. First, it is not about rushing. The point is not to finish everything in 2 hours, or to increase stress by working frantically. Instead, the rule is about creating space for calm, deliberate, and intentional work where your brain can function at its best. Second, it is not about perfection. The goal is not to achieve flawless results in a single sitting, but to make meaningful progress that builds over time. Finally, it is not about arbitrarily cutting work hours or abandoning responsibilities. The rule works best when integrated thoughtfully into your schedule, ensuring that other commitments are managed and that focus is prioritized rather than simply imposed. Understanding these distinctions helps prevent misapplication and ensures that the principle remains both effective and sustainable. Why 2 hours? This is not a random number. It is both a psychologically and biologically realistic limit. Research in cognitive science suggests that most people can maintain deep focus for roughly 90 to 120 minutes before mental fatigue begins to reduce efficiency and clarity. Beyond this window, errors increase, attention wanes, and the quality of work suffers. By concentrating on a 2-hour block, we allow the brain to reach its optimal operating capacity without overtaxing our cognitive resources. This duration is also practical in daily life. Unlike extremely long stretches of deep work that are difficult to protect, a 2-hour session can realistically be scheduled, prioritized, and defended against distractions, making it an achievable and sustainable habit. A key insight of the 2-hour rule is the difference between working hard and working deeply. Working hard often means spending hours moving between tasks, reacting to notifications, or performing routine activities. Working deeply, however, means total engagement with a single meaningful task, where every minute is amplified by full attention. Deep work produces far more output, insight, and mastery in less time, and it also leaves a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that shallow work rarely achieves. Consistency, rather than intensity, is the secret here. Regularly protecting 2 hours of focused attention creates compounding benefits over days, weeks, and months, far surpassing irregular bursts of frantic effort. To implement this effectively, the emphasis must always be on intention. The 2-hour rule is a tool for designing your attention strategically. It encourages planning, eliminating distractions, and respecting your cognitive limits. By approaching tasks this way, we shift the metric of success from hours spent to value created. Instead of measuring effort by the clock, we measure it by clarity, progress, and depth. For C1 level listeners, this explanation reinforces not only understanding of a practical productivity technique, but also strengthens skills in structured reasoning, precise definitions, and logical application of abstract concepts. By grasping the 2-hour rule fully, learners gain a method that is simple, powerful, and deeply aligned with how human attention actually works. Deep work versus distracted work. A real-life comparison. To truly understand the power of the 2-hour rule, it helps to see the contrast between deep work and distracted work in real-life situations. Imagine, for a moment, studying a language. One day, you set aside a focused 2-hour block. You silence notifications, close irrelevant tabs, and commit yourself entirely to reading, listening, speaking, and writing exercises. During these 2 hours, your mind is fully present. You notice subtleties in grammar, remember new vocabulary, and can practice speaking without constant interruptions. When the session ends, you feel a sense of satisfaction, a quiet fatigue that comes from concentrated effort. But more importantly, you notice tangible progress. Concepts stick in your mind, sentences flow more naturally, and confidence grows. Now contrast this with a typical distracted study session. You open your language book or app, but leave your phone nearby, checking messages every few minutes. You might glance at social media, reply to emails, or jump between multiple online resources. Hours pass, but your retention is poor. Words and grammar fade quickly because your attention has been fragmented. By the end, you may feel exhausted, but the exhaustion is different. It is scattered, draining, and unsatisfying. The mental effort feels heavy, yet the sense of progress is minimal. This is the emotional difference between distracted work and deep work. One leaves the mind energized and fulfilled, the other leaves it tired, fragmented, and unmotivated. This contrast is not limited to language learning. Consider writing a report, working on a project, or solving a complex problem. In a deeply focused session, ideas emerge naturally, solutions appear more quickly, and work flows without constant interruption. The output is often higher quality, more coherent, and more complete. In distracted conditions, however, work becomes fragmented. Ideas are harder to sustain, and mistakes are more frequent. You may find yourself rereading the same paragraph multiple times or revisiting problems you thought were solved. The effort may feel intense, but the results rarely match the input. This is why output quality is a key marker of deep work. It is not measured in hours, but in the substance and clarity of what is produced. Another important factor is learning retention. When the brain engages fully with a task, connections are formed more efficiently. Knowledge is not only absorbed but integrated, allowing future tasks to build on previous learning. Shallow, distracted effort rarely leaves lasting impact. Information slips away, understanding is partial, and improvement is slow. Mental clarity is also affected. Deep work creates a sense of mental space, allowing the mind to focus on the next task without the residue of incomplete activities. Distracted work, in contrast, scatters attention, leaving a lingering sense of unfinished business that clouds thinking and reduces effectiveness. Finally, the sense of progress itself differs dramatically between these two modes. Deep work provides measurable, tangible steps forward. Even if the total time is short, the feeling of having truly accomplished something is strong and motivating. Distracted work, despite long hours, often creates an illusion of busyness rather than meaningful progress. Over time, this difference accumulates. Consistent, deep work produces mastery, skill, and confidence, while fragmented effort generates fatigue, frustration, and stagnation. For C1-level learners, this segment not only improves narrative listening skills, but also encourages applied reasoning. Listeners can evaluate their own work habits, recognize patterns, and understand the clear cause and effect relationship between attention, effort, and results. By reflecting on these examples, it becomes clear that the 2-hour rule is not an abstract idea, but a practical approach with real-world benefits. 2 focused hours of deep work transform learning, output, and even emotional experience, far surpassing long stretches of distracted effort. Recognizing the differences between these 2 approaches allows learners to make conscious choices about how they use their time, energy, and attention, turning insight into action and theory into meaningful progress. Common myths about long hours and hustle. In today's society, there are powerful cultural beliefs that shape how we think about work, effort, and success. Many of these beliefs are so deeply ingrained that we rarely question them, yet they often block us from achieving true productivity and focus. One of the most common myths is the idea that more hours automatically mean more commitment. The assumption seems straightforward. If you stay late, work weekends, or keep your calendar packed, you must be dedicated, loyal, and industrious. But this belief ignores a crucial distinction. Time spent does not equal value produced. Long hours can easily become a form of busy work, filling our calendars with motion rather than meaningful progress. True commitment is not measured by presence or quantity, but by intentionality, focus, and the quality of output. Spending 10 hours distracted or scattered may feel like dedication, but it often results in less achievement than 2 hours of deeply concentrated effort. Another widely held myth is that successful people work all the time. Media portrayals of entrepreneurs, creatives, and leaders often emphasize extreme schedules, late nights, early mornings, and relentless activity. While some individuals can tolerate long hours in bursts, this is not a universal model of productivity, nor is it necessary to achieve mastery or meaningful outcomes. In reality, most high performers prioritize deep, focused sessions over sheer volume. They manage their energy, protect their attention, and structure their work in ways that maximize impact, not just time spent. Believing that constant work equals success leads many to sacrifice rest, reflection, and creativity, all of which are essential for sustainable performance. This myth perpetuates the misconception that productivity is about endurance rather than intelligence, strategy, and focus. A third myth is particularly harmful: the notion that rest is a reward, not a requirement. Many people operate under the belief that taking breaks, sleeping enough, or simply stepping away from work is indulgent or lazy. Yet rest is not optional. It is fundamental to effective thinking, learning, and performance. Without adequate recovery, cognitive function declines, decision-making suffers, and attention becomes fragmented. Deep work requires energy, and energy is a limited resource. Viewing rest as a necessity rather than a luxury reframes productivity entirely. It moves the focus from how long we work to how well we manage our mental and physical resources. To counter these myths, it helps to adopt a key reframing. Productivity is less about time management and more about energy management. The hours we work are important, but even more important is the quality of attention and effort we bring to those hours. Managing energy means knowing when your mind is sharpest, protecting blocks of time from distractions, and respecting the natural rhythms of focus and rest. Similarly, it is useful to view focus as a skill, not a personality trait. Many believe that some people are naturally disciplined, while others are not, but in reality, attention is a capacity that can be cultivated, practiced, and strengthened. Deep focus is not reserved for a few lucky individuals. It is a skill accessible to anyone willing to structure their environment, habits, and mindset around meaningful work. For C1 level learners, this section is particularly valuable because it encourages evaluative thinking. Listeners are invited to examine assumptions they may hold unconsciously, weigh evidence, and consider alternative perspectives. Exposure to persuasive argument structures, presenting myths, contrasting them with evidence, and reframing understanding strengthens critical thinking, comprehension, and the ability to follow sophisticated reasoning in English. By recognizing these myths, learners can release the unnecessary pressure of long hours, challenge cultural narratives, and adopt strategies that prioritize focus, energy, and meaningful progress over mere activity. Ultimately, understanding these misconceptions is not about avoiding effort. It is about directing effort wisely. The 2-hour rule, deep work, and intentional focus all gain their power when combined with the awareness that time alone does not create results. By rejecting these myths, we can approach work, learning, and life with clarity, purpose, and respect for both our energy and our attention. This is a crucial step toward mastering productivity in a way that is sustainable, intelligent, and deeply satisfying. How to use the 2-hour rule in real life. Now that we have explored the theory behind the 2-hour rule and the power of deep focus, the next step is to see how it can be applied practically in everyday life. Understanding a principle is one thing, but using it effectively requires deliberate action. The first step is deciding what deserves your 2 hours of undistracted attention. Not every task benefits from deep focus. Simple, routine, or repetitive work, like checking emails, organizing files, or administrative chores, rarely requires total concentration. Instead, the 2-hour block should be reserved for tasks that demand creativity, problem-solving, learning, or skill development. For example, if you are learning English, this could be a focused session practicing speaking, reading complex texts, or writing essays. For creative work, it could be designing, coding, painting, or composing. Choosing carefully ensures that your mental energy is invested where it produces the greatest value. Once the task is selected, protecting these hours from interruption becomes essential. Distractions are the greatest enemy of deep work. Notifications, messages, social media, and even the well-intentioned interruptions of colleagues or family members can break concentration and diminish output. Strategies for protection might include turning off digital notifications, closing unrelated applications, informing others that you are unavailable, and creating a quiet, dedicated workspace. Some people find it helpful to schedule these hours in the morning, when mental energy is typically at its peak. Others may prefer a time in the afternoon or evening when interruptions are less likely. The key is intentionality. Treat these 2 hours as sacred, and defend them as you would an important appointment or meeting. Equally important is preparing the mind before starting. Deep work requires more than just sitting at a desk. It requires mental readiness. Begin by clarifying your goal for the session. What exactly do you want to accomplish? Break down the task into manageable steps if it is large or complex. Take a few moments to clear distractions, breathe deeply, and focus attention fully on the task. Some people find short rituals, like a brief walk, listening to calming music, or reviewing notes, help signal to the brain that it is time for concentrated effort. By priming the mind in this way, you maximize the effectiveness of the 2 hours and enter the flow state more quickly. During the session, the emphasis should be on steady, deliberate progress, not perfection or speed. Work with full attention and be mindful of the quality of effort rather than simply rushing to finish. If your mind wanders, gently redirect focus without judgment. The goal is consistency and presence, not flawless execution. When the session ends, practice ending deliberately, not exhaustively. Review what you accomplished, note what remains to be done, and take a moment to reflect on the session. This helps consolidate learning and maintain motivation. By ending consciously, you leave the session with a sense of accomplishment rather than mental fatigue or lingering stress. The 2-hour rule can be applied to many areas of life. In learning English, it allows for concentrated listening, reading, speaking, and writing practice. For creative work, it provides a protected space to design, compose, or innovate without distraction. In general skill development or studying, it enables focused review, problem-solving, or conceptual understanding. Across all these applications, the principle remains the same. Protect your attention, invest your energy deliberately, and allow deep concentration to guide your work. This section introduces procedural language and practical, real-world vocabulary that connects theory to action. It models how to give step-by-step instructions clearly and persuasively, while reinforcing concepts like focus, attention management, and flow. By practicing these strategies, learners can not only improve their productivity, but also enhance cognitive skills, critical thinking, and self-discipline. The 2-hour rule is simple, but its implementation requires intention, preparation, and reflection. Skills that, once cultivated, can transform learning, creativity, and personal achievement. Why 2 focused hours change? How you feel about work. When we talk about the 2-hour rule, it is easy to focus entirely on productivity, output, and measurable results. However, one of the most profound effects of dedicating 2 hours to deep, uninterrupted work is how it changes the way we feel about work itself. The benefits are not just practical. They are emotional and psychological, influencing motivation, satisfaction, and even our sense of self. Many of us approach long days feeling stressed, scattered, or guilty, often asking ourselves whether we have truly accomplished anything. By practicing focused work, even for a relatively short period, we can transform these feelings into clarity, confidence, and energy. One immediate impact is the reduction of guilt and burnout. When work is fragmented or constantly interrupted, we may feel busy but not productive, which often leads to a sense of inadequacy or anxiety. Completing 2 hours of focused work provides tangible evidence of achievement. The brain can recognize progress, and the mind experiences the quiet satisfaction that comes from truly engaging with a meaningful task. This diminishes the guilt associated with unfinished work and prevents the slow accumulation of stress that often accompanies long, distracted workdays. Rather than leaving the day with a sense of being overworked and underaccomplished, you leave it feeling purposeful, rested in your mind, and clear about what you have achieved. Another significant effect is increased confidence and self-trust. When we prove to ourselves that we can protect attention, maintain focus, and produce meaningful work without distraction, we build trust in our own capabilities. Each successful 2-hour session reinforces the belief that we can manage our energy, prioritize effectively, and deliver results. This self-trust is powerful because it shifts the source of motivation from external validation, checking off tasks or pleasing others, to internal assurance. We begin to rely less on busyness as proof of value and more on focused accomplishment as a source of confidence and competence. Deep, focused work also provides a clearer sense of direction. Shallow or distracted work can leave us feeling adrift, unsure of what we have accomplished or where we are headed. In contrast, a 2-hour session creates structure and clarity. It allows the mind to organize priorities, connect ideas, and recognize progress toward larger goals. Even if the task is small, the intentional focus creates a mental map of achievement, showing us exactly what has been done and what remains. Over time, this clarity compounds, producing greater control over daily work, long-term projects, and personal development. Finally, 2 focused hours can foster motivation through progress rather than pressure. Many of us mistake stress and urgency for drive, believing that constant effort under pressure is the key to productivity. While this may produce short-term output, it often undermines long-term performance, creativity, and well-being. Focused, uninterrupted work generates a different type of motivation, one rooted in momentum, satisfaction, and mastery. When we see concrete results, even small ones, motivation arises naturally from the joy of progress. Pressure is no longer necessary to push ourselves. Instead, momentum builds organically from the accomplishment of meaningful work. For C1 level learners, this section provides not only practical insight, but also builds emotional vocabulary and encourages reflective comprehension. Words like satisfaction, confidence, momentum, clarity, and self-trust are reinforced in context, allowing listeners to describe feelings and experiences with precision. By connecting the cognitive benefits of deep work to emotional outcomes, learners gain a more holistic understanding of productivity. They can see that the 2-hour rule is not merely a time management strategy, but a practice that nurtures well-being, motivation, and self-awareness. In this way, learning becomes not just about skill acquisition, but also about cultivating a healthier, more empowering relationship with effort, attention, and achievement. Ultimately, the 2-hour rule transforms work from a source of stress into a source of fulfillment. It allows us to move beyond the exhaustion of scattered effort and experience the quiet, energizing satisfaction that comes from true focus. By consistently engaging in these periods of deep work, we reshape not only our productivity, but also our emotional experience, creating a work life that is both effective and deeply satisfying. As we approach the close of this discussion, it is important to pause and reflect on what truly defines a good day. Many of us unconsciously measure success by the number of hours worked, the length of our to-do lists, or the number of tasks completed. From an early age, society teaches us that busyness equals achievement, and that endurance is the hallmark of commitment. Yet, as we have explored today, this perspective can be misleading. A day full of motion may feel productive, but without focus, energy, and intention, the effort often leaves the mind tired, scattered, and unfulfilled. Reflection invites us to consider a different standard, one that prioritizes depth, clarity, and the quality of our attention over mere duration. What if, for instance, success were not measured by how long you worked, but by how fully you engaged with your tasks? Imagine a day in which 2 hours of concentrated effort on meaningful work were your defining accomplishment. In that brief period, you might learn a new concept, produce work of high quality, or make significant progress on a creative project. The rest of the day could be spent resting, reflecting, or preparing for the next session. By redefining success in this way, the measure of a good day shifts from quantity to quality, from hours spent to results achieved and attention devoted. This perspective challenges the conventional emphasis on endurance, highlighting instead the power of focus and intention. Another profound idea to consider is that focus itself is an act of respect for your mind. Every time we protect attention, eliminate distractions, and fully immerse ourselves in meaningful work, we honor the capacity and value of our own cognitive resources. Focus is not merely a tool for productivity. It is a way of engaging with life thoughtfully, consciously, and deliberately. By recognizing that our attention is finite and valuable, we can approach each day with intention rather than reaction, creating moments of clarity and presence instead of hours of fragmented activity. A day defined by respect for the mind is not only productive in the conventional sense, but also nourishing and empowering. Finally, consider the idea of measuring days by depth rather than duration. What would change if we no longer assessed success by the total number of hours spent working or the sheer quantity of tasks checked off? What if the true measure of a day's value were the intensity of focus, the meaningfulness of work, and the degree to which we were present in each moment? This reframing encourages philosophical and introspective thinking. It invites us to question long-held assumptions about effort, productivity, and achievement, and to recognize that real progress, whether in learning, creating, or problem-solving, often comes from concentrated, deliberate engagement rather than prolonged busyness. For C1 level learners, this reflective segment builds interpretive listening skills, encouraging careful attention to abstract ideas, contrasts, and nuanced language. It strengthens philosophical reflection, prompting listeners to integrate insights from earlier sections and consider how attention, focus, and intention shape their own experience of work and learning. Questions about depth versus duration, respect for the mind, and the quality of engagement provide a framework for introspection, helping learners connect cognitive and emotional understanding to practical action. Ultimately, redefining a good day is about reclaiming agency over how we invest time and attention. It is about shifting from the assumption that longer hours equal greater value to the recognition that focus, clarity, and meaningful engagement are the true measures of accomplishment. By contemplating these ideas, we open the possibility for days that are not only productive, but also fulfilling, energizing, and intellectually satisfying. Reflection allows us to step back, assess our habits, and consider how small but intentional changes, like dedicating 2 hours of deep focus, can reshape not only what we do, but how we feel about our work, our learning, and ourselves. As we bring this discussion to a close, it is worth taking a moment to step back and reflect calmly on what we have explored. The 2-hour rule is not a rigid formula or a test of endurance. It is an invitation to engage with your work and learning in a more conscious, deliberate way. It is a principle that asks only that you experiment, observe, and respect the natural limits and capacities of your mind. There is no rush, no requirement for perfection, and no judgment about how quickly you adopt it. The focus here is on clarity, intention, and gentle curiosity, qualities that allow the mind to function at its best, even if only for a single session. By approaching this principle calmly, we remove pressure and instead create space for insight, growth, and meaningful progress. I want to invite you, as a listener, to try one focused 2-hour block yourself. It can be applied to any task that matters to you: learning English, writing, studying, creating, or solving a challenging problem. Begin by choosing a task that feels significant. Prepare your environment to reduce distractions, and give yourself permission to immerse fully for the full 2 hours. Notice how your mind responds, the clarity that emerges, the momentum that builds, and the satisfaction of truly engaging without interruption. Importantly, observe your experience without judgment. You may find your attention wanders, or you may discover a flow state that surprises you. Both are valuable pieces of feedback that can guide future practice. Experimentation is the key here, learning about your own patterns of focus and energy, rather than striving to meet an external standard. This experiment is not meant to be measured in terms of speed or perfection. The goal is not to finish something quickly, nor to complete a set number of tasks. It is to experience the difference between scattered effort and deep attention. As you reflect on this experience, consider the subtle changes in your mental clarity, your sense of accomplishment, and your emotional state. How does it feel to leave a session with tangible progress rather than the exhausted, scattered fatigue of long, distracted work? How does your motivation shift when it arises naturally from focused engagement, rather than from stress or pressure? Paying attention to these questions allows the practice of deep work to become both a learning tool and a guide for self-awareness. It is also valuable to notice the emotional benefits that accompany focused attention. When the mind is fully present, guilt about incomplete tasks diminishes, confidence and self-trust increase, and a sense of direction becomes clearer. Even small blocks of deep work can transform how we perceive productivity and personal accomplishment. By observing these outcomes with curiosity rather than judgment, we develop a richer understanding of our own cognitive and emotional patterns. Over time, repeated 2-hour sessions, protected, intentional, and reflective, can transform not only what we achieve, but also how we experience work, learning, and growth. Finally, I encourage you to approach this principle with a peaceful and thoughtful mindset. The 2-hour rule is not about adding pressure, racing against the clock, or adhering to strict schedules. It is about creating a gentle structure that allows your attention, energy, and creativity to flourish. Think of it as a personal invitation to engage deeply with your work and learning, while honoring the natural rhythms of your mind and body. As you experiment, reflect, and refine your approach, you may discover that the quality of attention matters far more than the quantity of hours, and that meaningful progress often comes from intention not intensity. In closing, take this as a calm invitation to experiment, to observe, and to learn about your own patterns of focus and energy. Protect your attention, embrace the process of deep engagement, and notice the subtle but profound shifts that occur when work is approached with clarity, intention, and respect. Let these 2 hours, small as they may seem, serve as a foundation for a more mindful, productive, and satisfying approach to your learning and your life. By taking even one deliberate session, you begin to reclaim control over your attention, cultivate meaningful progress, and create a richer, more thoughtful experience of work itself.